Hello, and welcome to General Psychology. My name is Dr. Flux, and I'm going to be your instructor for this semester. Welcome to this very first lecture and our journey into this world. Today, we're diving into something fundamental, how we build models of our world. But before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to the instructors that really helped develop the PSYC textbook. That's what we're going to be using, and their slides helped me out a lot in developing my own. First off, I want to thank Dr. Ryan Curtis, whose version of this course I've modeled mine off of, as well as Dr. Scott Roberts and Dr. Dylan Selterman. But all three of them helped to develop the PSYC framework. So let's dive into it. In our first lecture, we're going to be beginning by using an example, and then we'll dive a little bit more deeply into what a model is. We'll then segue into how psychology is a science, introducing the ABCs of psychology, and then we'll wrap up by comparing psychology to a few other fields before we conclude with a bit of review. Let's start our journey with a story. Picture this, it's a crisp, snowy morning, and I've decided that I want to go hit the slopes in Breckenridge. I've got my epic pass ready, and I am absolutely psyched. But there's one question. What's the traffic going to be like? So, like any modern human, I just pull up Google Maps. Here's a map of Colorado, or at least part of it, and I can see two routes to Breckenridge, each with potential driving times. So this is perfect. But wait a second. Am I looking at the state of Colorado? Now, you might say, yeah, Dr. Flux, this is a map of Colorado, but let me rephrase that. Am I looking at the actual state of Colorado? Not really, right? I'm looking at a representation. A map isn't Colorado itself. It's not showing me every tree, every blade of grass, or squirrel, everything along the way. It's a simplified but colorful version of reality. But here's a twist. If this map isn't the true Colorado, can I trust it? How do I know that it'll actually get me to Breckenridge? Now, the thing is, a map doesn't have to be 100% accurate to be useful. It's missing a lot of details, but it still helps me to get where I'm going. Now, here's another question. Are these two travel times that Google gave me exactly how long it's going to take me to get to Breckenridge? Probably not, right? There are so many variables that Google can't account for. Maybe a herd of elk decides to cross the road, or maybe there's an avalanche somewhere that blocks traffic. These travel times are based on algorithms using previous traffic data, road closures, and even some real-time driver updates. They're wrong in the sense that they aren't precise, but they are still pretty useful. Perhaps I'll even get tired of Google Maps travel times. Maybe they aren't really accurate enough for me at a certain point, so I'll switch to Apple Maps. Apple Maps uses different algorithms to predict travel times. I might decide that their models are more useful to me than Google Maps, or perhaps I'll switch back and forth depending on where I am in the country. Maps, travel times, these are all models that I'm using to plan my trip. And like any model, they leave things out, but that's okay, because models don't have to be perfect. They just have to be helpful. This brings me to one of my favorite quotes. All models are wrong, but some are useful, by George E.P. Box, a British statistician. No model will ever fully encapsulate reality. We build models as shortcuts to make the vast complexities of reality easier to work with. Now, some of these models will be more useful than others. In science, we're trying to build useful models, while knowing that they will always fall short of reality in some way. Models are representational. They reflect reality. They help to simplify complex systems, and they often help us to predict what's coming next. Let's do a check to make sure you've been paying attention. Throughout these lectures, I'll often pause to ask some brief questions and to check up on your knowledge, so this should be an easy one. All right, fill in the blank. All models are blank, but some are blank. A, helpful but false. B, Earth and Colorado. C, wrong but useful. D, true but falsifiable. The correct answer is, of course, C. I hope that you're keeping up. Now think about science. In physics, we've built models for centuries, and you're probably familiar with some of them. For example, Newtonian physics worked pretty great at predicting the motion of objects, but eventually Einstein's theory of special relativity replaced it. Now we have quantum mechanics, which takes things even further. But here's the catch. Even in physics, none of these models are right. They're tools, simplifications that let us understand the principles of the universe. And as we gather more data, we refine and replace our models. Psychology works in the same way. It's a science just like physics. But in psychology, we're building models of phenomena that are often a lot harder to pin down. We create models to understand emotions, behavior, and thoughts. Now, you might be saying, but Dr. Flux, isn't psychology different from physics? There aren't as many numbers and formulas. Well, let me tell you, if you want numbers and formulas, just ask me about using Bayesian statistics and signal detection theory when I was studying visual psychophysics back in my days at NYU. There are a lot of numbers. Here you can see me presenting at the Society for Neuroscience conference in New Orleans in 2012. Science, including psychology, is empirical in that it relies on being able to make repeated observations about a phenomenon. Science is systematic in that it uses structured methodology to accomplish these observations. Science seeks to be objective, looking to find patterns that exist outside of opinions, beliefs, to reliably explain the world in many contexts. In science, we make predictions that are falsifiable, such that they can be tested and we can see whether our predictions are useful or not. And science is also iterative. It builds on the knowledge of the past to continue to come up with new and insightful ways of understanding the world. Psychology does all of these things. However, the things that we study in psychology tend to be a lot more challenging to pin down, which is perhaps why people call it a soft science. How do we study something like love? How can we understand consciousness? What methods do we use to capture human thought and emotion? These are complex topics that are often difficult to pin down. But this is what psychology does. It's looking to understand these ephemeral and sometimes contradictory concepts. Psychology builds models to explore questions like, what causes stress? How do we form memories? Why do people make irrational decisions? In psychology, we stick to the ABCs. The American Psychological Association, or the APA, describes psychology in the following 3 words: affect, or feelings, which refers to our emotions, moods, and stress; behavior, or our actions, which refers to our habits and observable patterns; and then cognition, or our thoughts, beliefs, memories, decision-making. Now, when we refer to affect, this is different from effect. Affect is a very specific concept in psychology, and it refers to how we feel. I teach a class in human emotion that dives deeply into the philosophy and science of how we understand how we feel, and it can get incredibly complex. Emotions, moods, well-being, this is the domain of psychology. How do we understand this basic component of being human? And why did mood dang make me so happy in 2024? Behaviors are how we act. How do we decipher actions and create predictable models that explain what we do and why? Do we have free will? Do people act different in crowds than they do on their own? Why did someone in Germany turn me into a meme questioning my style choices? Cognition, on the other hand, is how we think. It encompasses beliefs, memories, and how we make decisions. Can we trust our memories? How do we process information? Why did someone decide that these Oompa Loompas were child-friendly in the Willy Wonka's chocolate experience fiasco in Scotland in the winter of 2024? I'm really going to have to update these references each year, aren't I? Okay, time for another attention check question. Which of the following is not one of the ABCs in psychology? A, affect or feelings; B, behavior or actions; C, cognition or thoughts; or D, culture or traditions? The answer is D. While we definitely look at culture in psychology, we often explore it in the context of the ABCs: affect, behavior, and cognition. Before we wrap up, let's clarify how psychology differs from related fields. Sociology focuses on groups and societies, while psychology tends to zoom in on the individual. Anthropology looks at human cultures over time, which is a bit different. Psychiatry tends to focus more on medical treatments for mental health disorders. And then in political science, we really study the structures and systems of government and policy, not necessarily psychology. But psychology tends to be inherent and important to each of these fields. Remember, each of these fields is built on models, but they're tackling different aspects of the human condition, and they're often doing so from different perspectives and using very different methodologies. So here's my challenge to you. Think about the models you rely on every day. Like when you predict how a friend is feeling based on their tone or body language. You're building a model. Ask yourself, even though these models might be wrong, when can they be useful? Let's do 2 more review questions before we close. First up, which of the following best describes a model in psychology? A complete and perfect representation of reality, a simplified version of reality that helps us understand and predict phenomenon, a subjective opinion about human behavior, or an unchanging scientific law? The answer is, of course, B. A model is a simplified version of reality designed to help us understand and predict phenomenon, even though it may not capture every detail. Question 2. According to the American Psychological Society, or APA, which of the ABCs of psychology refers to feelings? Actions, attributions, allotment, or affect? The answer here is D, affect. Affect is how we discuss feelings in psychology, and it helps us to build models of the human emotional experience. Now, in this course, we'll be examining many different models that attempt to explain these ABCs. Some of these models may contradict each other, some models will work better in certain situations, and less well in others. I want you to keep in mind that each of these models is a simplified way of understanding our very complex human experience. None of them ever fully capture all of the nuance that makes up this complex, messy world of human thoughts, behavior, and feelings. In the next lecture, we're going to be exploring some of these different models that are currently used to help us build broad approaches to psychology. Now, I'll leave you with my usual end of lecture send-off. Stay curious, stay resilient, and above all, live life in flux. I'll see you next time. Flux out.